Welcome. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program, and thank you for joining us today. I'm your host, Daniel Davis. Many times we've covered on our program what happens when the kids finally grow up and move out of the house, what to do. They call that empty nester syndrome. Well, sometimes the solution might be a lot easier than you think and maybe a lot more complicated once you take that step. Joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program today is Michael Tucker, and for many of you who might know the name or be familiar with it, he was on the hit television series L.A. Law and was also nominated for 3 Emmy Awards during this time. He was also married to Jill Elkenberry, who also played opposite him on L.A. Law as his wife, and interestingly enough, they were also married in real life as well. Very endearing couple, and they're here to share with us today what it was like to take care of that empty nester syndrome by simply living abroad in Italy. And the book today is Living in a Foreign Language, a memoir of food, wine, and love in Italy. And joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program today is Michael Tucker, and as I understand it, his wife, Jill. Thank you for joining us on the program today.
Hi, Daniel. It's my pleasure.
My very good. Now,
and Jill will get on in just a second.
Okay, very good. Probably trying to get that prosciutto carried, I take it.
Exactly.
Now, again, the book had just dropped into my lap yesterday, but I was kind of browsing through it, and it's something that I've been very entertained to read the different things. It's kind of fun when you discover how different culture can be once you step out of the United States, and certainly you must have had some interesting awakenings in your experience.
Oh, we're still having them. What we noticed, especially, is that as our Italian got better and better, we really got to know the people better. It was, we were sort of first we were hanging out with what we call Anglophones, people who spoke English, a lot of expats and people like that. But to really get into the country, we had to learn the language, and we just got back from a trip. We were over there 6 weeks at our house, and at least 2 or 3 evenings a week we had all Italian evenings, people that just didn't speak English. And that's the way to kind of boost your language,
I know that I had spent some time over in Italy myself, places such as Naples, and it could be kind of difficult if you don't speak the language to navigate yourself around, but you find that people tend to be very helpful that way, and also getting to understand how they do things, because it's quite different.
Oh yeah, everything is different. The sense of time is extraordinarily different. The first day we get there, we're still on New York time. We're still thinking that way, and we'll go to our favorite restaurant and we'll have lunch with some friends and be there an hour and a half, 2 hours, and at a certain point I'll raise my finger, for the international gesture of "could I have the check, please?" and the waitress will smile at me and eventually come over and pour a little more wine in my glass, and then she'll disappear, and 15 minutes later I'll see her again and I'll make that gesture a little more forcefully, and she'll smile and come and ask if we want a little something for dessert. And finally I realize that what she's telling me is that there's no place I have to go that's better than where I am right now. So just relax. All the stores are closed. There's no place to go. And you're having a wonderful time. And it's so different. The first day we get back to the States, and we'll go someplace for lunch, and we'll go in, and 15 minutes later we're out standing on the sidewalk, and we're saying, what the hell was that? It certainly wasn't lunch.
Yeah, exactly. Now, you bought a place that was 350 years old, and it was really neat how you talk about that. It was a rustico, as you described that.
Yes.
And what was kind of funny about it, as you described what a rustico really was, it was a migrant workers' farmhouse, a place that they stay.
Exactly.
And it was a place where migrant actors ended up.
That's right. A pair of sad migrant actors ended up there. We have a plan. The migrant workers primarily who came there and stayed there were to pick the olives, because we're in the middle of one of the great olive oil regions in Italy, in Umbria, and we have 125 olive trees, and every year our gardener gets some guys together and picks them and makes our own oil. We have about maybe 40 liters a year that we get out. So it's, enough oil for our own use and a few gifts and things like that. But this year, we're bound and determined to go over and pick the olives ourselves. So that's a date that we have.
No. Now, why did you decide Italy, and especially the part that you decided to actually buy a place?
It was a completely, haphazard thing like everything else in our lives. I had been trying to convince Jill for years that we wanted to have a house over there. I feel very drawn to Europe. At first, actually, it was in France. I wanted to be in the south of France. Until a friend of mine says, "Why do you want to have a house in the south of France?" And I said, "Because it's so close to Italy." Aha! So, but Jill said, "I love Italy. We have friends over there. We did a movie over there years ago, and we have some good friends there." And she said, "Let's go. We'll stay in a hotel. But why should we buy a house?" So a friend of ours was having her 60th birthday party in Puglia, which is in Italy at the bottom of the heel of the boot, that part of Italy. And we decided to take a month's trip and drive from the very top of Italy to the very bottom, and avoid all the cities. We had been to the cities before, and just to stay out in the country in these different regions and take a month to do it. So in the middle of that trip, we met this woman, because we had talked to her because she had contacted us with this place that we were supposed to get this incredible meal, which we did get this incredible meal, which was a farmhouse where everything you eat is grown on the farm. And it was an amazing meal. So we got in contact with her, and we sort of were very taken with this part of Italy where we had never been before, around the Spoleto Valley in Umbria. And at one point we said to this woman who was American, we said, "Well, what do you do over here?" And she looked at us very pointedly, and she said, "I sell real estate to people like you." And, of course, Jill said, "No, we're not interested in buying a house." And the next day I said, "Well, could we see something?" And Jill again, raised her hand in protest. And I said, "Not to buy, just, it's a nice way to learn the customs. It's a nice way to see things. It's a nice way to meet the people." Yeah. So we go and we see this one house, and that's very nice, and we see another house, and then we see the Rustico, the house that we eventually bought. And we said to the people, "It's very nice. We're not interested in buying. We have to get on the road in 15 minutes." And they said, "Well, sit down, have a glass of wine." And one thing led to another. 4 hours later, we're still sitting there under the pergola talking to these fantastic people. Uh-huh. And I looked across the table, and Jill nodded. It was a very significant nod, And the earth moved. I thought, we're really going to do this. And later I said, "Why did you change your mind? Why now?" And she said, "Because it was home. It felt like home." And indeed, it is. It is our home.
I know it's really unique, too, as you were talking earlier about
I think that's my cue. I'm sorry.
Oh, there's my
there
gal.
She is.
This is Daniel.
Welcome, Jill,
Hi,
to the Beyond
Daniel.
50 radio program. And he was just talking about how at first you were resistant to the place that you eventually bought, and was describing that to you it began to feel like home after they decided, well, why don't you just sit here for a minute, and again 4 hours later. What was it that changed for you?
Well, France, the south of France was so beautiful, but it always felt like a place to visit. It felt like, an exotic and wonderful vacation, and something about that spot in Umbria, with the olive trees surrounding. Still, when we drive up to it, we get the same feeling. It's just there's a sense of it having been there forever, and being a place of great joy and comfort to us instantly. It doesn't feel like like we're tourists. The minute we drive down the driveway, we feel like we're home.
Now, one thing I noticed as I was telling Michael earlier is that I have had the opportunity to be at different cities in Italy, and what I noticed is really interesting is the fact that here America is about a little over 200 years old, so it's still a fresh kind of a place, if you will. is that in Italy, buildings are just, they seem so ancient. We're talking 500, maybe even 1,000 years old in some cases. And in the case of you folks, you had a house that was 350 years old. Mm-hmm. You could almost see the draw of feeling like you're at home just because of that kind of lengthy experience, for lack of a better word. Does that kind of, did you feel that kind of draw as well?
You feel kind of rooted in that place,
right?
Because of its history.
We walk on the bricks. They call them pianelli in our house, in the old house, and we know how many people have walked on those floors because you can see the slope of the brick. You can see the place where people have treaded for 350 years, and there's something about that. It gives you a sense of continuity of the sort of human experience or something. And somebody said that she had an experience where she was in Florence, or in Spoleto, which is our nearby city, our wonderful town, and she was there with a group, leading a group for an Italian course. And her mother died in the States, and she wasn't able to leave until she got a replacement for her group. And she said, I walked these old ancient streets of Spoleto, thinking about my mother. She said it was very comforting, this feeling of life going on after me and before me, and there's something about it that's just not like anything else in this country.
Yeah. Now,
and another thing about where we are, it's not very heavily touristed. We're about 25 minutes away from Assisi, and that's very heavily touristed. That's one of the big tourist spots in Italy. But out in the country where we are, it's really the way it was then. Not much has changed. It's farmers. It's primarily olives, but there are other crops. It's a farm economy, and people are doing things the way they did them hundreds of years ago. And certain modern conveniences, but in general, it hasn't changed, and that's an amazing feeling.
And I think the other thing about it I'm sorry that we have such a long answer to this question.
Oh no, that's great.
I think the other thing about the home feeling is that so many of our friends that we've come to know in Italy are families. Families who have been doing. Have been running that restaurant for generations, many generations, and now the kids are being the waitresses, and the sisters are in the kitchen, and the mother is making the pasta, and there's a sense of family there that has been very profound for us, actually. Mike is writing his next book about this whole phenomenon that's actually occurred with our family, and we think been influenced by our time in Italy, that we've really come together as a family since we sort of got the Italian model. And that's a very different way of doing things than many people in our culture do them these days. A lot of times our families are spread all over the place. So there's something very, very nurturing about that, too.
Well, you certainly have the family stories, and I think that's probably one of the wonderful treasures of one of the things that you discovered there in Italy is the fact that you have that. My uncle Giorgio, for instance, or it goes on, and it could be about something like as simple as prosciutto ham, and there's a specific recipe for that. And that was one thing that I was noticing that was a lot of fun in your book is it almost felt like one long party at times as you're reading this, because there was always eating, there was always drinking wine, and the sense of community, and it just went on. And I think the question that I was going to ask earlier here was, as you were beginning to settle in, as you were beginning to be a little more fluent in your Italian, did you ever have that feeling, those damn tourists, why don't they just stay home?
Well, we don't see that many tourists, so we're spared that. But I think I probably would think that. I would think that they're kind of an intrusion in a way. But I don't know. I've been a tourist, so I guess people felt the same way about me.
Now,
it depends on the person. There are good tourists and bad tourists.
That's true. I totally agree with that. I remember as I was out with friends, and then there were other friends, and this was while we were in Italy, and it was so funny watching these other guys who were part of our crowd, wandering around as though nobody in Italy had ever seen an American before.
Right.
Like, are you out of your mind? These people settled America. What are you
That's
doing?
Right.
You know?
That's right.
Now, what is it, 35 plus years the two of you have been together, and,
Yes.
you know, here you are on the hit television series L.A. Law as a husband and wife as well. When you see people that are in show business who are together as couples, I'm sure you have your own little magic elixir that's kept you together, but, you know, something like a career in entertainment can be very demanding. How did you hold it together to create such a wonderful relationship?
There's probably a number of things. My pat answer to that, which is probably the truest answer, is marry Jill Eikenberry, and it'll all work out just fine.
Just do whatever she tells you to do.
Whatever she says, I'll try to do it, and maybe give her a little bit more than she asks for. That seems to work out pretty well.
Now, as I was reading the book, I remember that there was a time you were describing that you were about to get up. You realized, well, I'm not in any real hurry. I've got a few hours before I have to be anywhere. I'm laying there and I'm listening to the birds sing. And you began to feel that sense of pace over there where, slow down. What are you in a hurry to go do, as you were talking about before?
Right,
and what was that like to adjust to that, to where you didn't feel as hurried as you might have felt as you were living in the States?
Well, I was going to say sort of that answer also it kind of answers the other question too. I think, you know, one of the great things about being in Italy is giving ourselves permission to enjoy life and have time and space to do it, and not feel so many obligations crowding in that we tend to feel when we're here. And that's really good for a relationship if you can, you know, make time together a priority. That's one of the things that kind of gets lost after you've been married for a while often. And I think we've one of the things we've learned, and we've actually taken courses and stuff too to have this reinforced, is that, you know, you have to keep at it with a relationship. You have to pay attention to it and make it, you know, more of a priority than your careers and your making of money and your even raising your kids. That you have to really have a sense that your time together is worth preserving and making, you know, making it fun and fabulous. And I must say that Mike is a great innovator in that field. He's like always thinking of fun things for us to do together, and I think that's a really important thing. And one of them is buying a house in Italy and giving ourselves that kind of permission, you know.
If you're good together and you know you're going to spend your whole life together, then you can do anything. You can go up, you can go down, you can go sideways. It doesn't matter if you're doing it together.
I know that, as you described in your book, the moment of sort of like jumping off the cliff, and you've been doing it ever since. And the whole idea of you getting into adventures, because a lot of couples sometimes, even in years and years of marriage, they seem to have that same old routine, and they wonder why they become bored with each other. It's because you don't stretch out of your comfort zone.
Yeah. Letting each other change and not being afraid of that. And accepting the fact that things do change. For example, in our early years, we were young actors, each trying to get our career started. We did a lot of traveling because we had to. If a job came up, we would go away from each other. We did a lot of that. That's what you have to do when you're in your 20s or your 30s. You have to get yourself going in the world, and so the relationship we sort of took for granted a little bit. And then at a certain point, and it probably had a great deal to do with the fact that Jill had breast cancer. How many years ago? Like
22.
22 years ago.
22 years ago. Well, congratulations on pulling through.
That kind of woke us up, and we said, well, maybe I don't want to be separated from you, even if a job comes up. And then the relationship became the priority, and the job had to fit into the relationship. If somebody called me, an agent called me and said, here's a job and a movie, and you're going to go away for 3 months to Australia, I'd say no.
I mean, we were incredibly lucky to get LA law together, to have those parts written for us together, because that happens so rarely. And I think, it would have been even harder for us had one of us become a sort of a household word and the other not. That was really fortunate that we experienced that big fame thing together.
On a wonderful show too. That was one of my favorite shows actually during its time. Yeah. And in fact, I kept remembering as I was told by the producer, "Hey, we're going to have Michael Tucker on the program," and I kept remembering that one episode, Michael, where the secretary, I can't remember what her name was,
Roxanne.
But she was, Roxanne, that's the one. And apparently she came into all this money, and you broke it down because you were sort of like the firm's CPA, if you will.
Right.
And we're showing her how you set her up to where she was going to be comfortable for the rest of her life. She says, "I don't want to be that way. I just want to just go crazy." Yeah. And here in real life, you guys actually did that. You went to Italy and said, "Let's just take a shot," And, and it's kind of interesting that you lived lived her advice, so to speak.
Right.
Yeah, indeed.
Now, in your book, you really have it's funny because as you talk about your community, the people that you're friends with, and all the dining and the wine drinking, it's like a zany cast of characters. You think, is he making a lot of this up? But you find that, again, because you're in a different place, that people are going to be different. And I would like you to describe your very first pizza party, what that was, what that was all about there.
Well, to begin with, I have to describe our oven called a forno. A forno is a brick wood-burning oven. Our forno is 400 years old, at least. It's at least 50 years older than the house that we're living in. And it was the community oven. So we're going back to the late... Hello?
Yeah, still here.
Oh, okay. We're going back to the late 1500s, early 1600s, just to historically put you in where we are. And this oven was the community oven. They say it was always going 24 hours a day, and different people would stoke the fire, and they would bake their bread, and they would roast their meats, and they would do all that in this oven. That's our oven. That's sitting outside our kitchen door. So a dear friend of mine, who's lived over there for years, really knows his way around one of these wood-burning ovens. And so we decided to make pizza for 30 or 40 of our friends. And
30 or 40.
It was something like that. Yeah, by the time we were done, we had about 30 or 40 people there, and it was a party. It must have been at least an 18-hour party, because it started in the afternoon, and we were building the fire, and people came, and we had, some things that we put out, some salami and cheeses and mozzarella and tomatoes and things from the garden, just to tide people over while we were stoking this fire, because it has to get very, very hot to make pizza.
Right.
And then about 6:37, we started making the pizzas one by one, and everybody pitched in. Everybody had their own, what they wanted on top of the pizza, and so it became quite a frenzy there. And my friend Bruce was the pizzaiolo, the master of the oven, and he never left his spot the whole time. He just kept, shoveling these pizzas in and turning them around and bringing them out. At that temperature, because we had the oven cranked up to probably about 800 degrees, a pizza cooks in 30 seconds. It's an amazing thing. You drop that pizza in there, and you can see instantly it blisters up, and the whole thing just changes like instantly. And there's no better pizza in the world than pizza made in an 800-degree wood oven.
I can believe that. One thing I did notice too when I was in Italy is I would tell people that pizza in Italy is a lot different than it is here in America.
Oh yeah. And pizza is different in Naples than it is in Rome, and pizza is different in Rome than it is in Florence. Every community has their own. The dough in Naples is a lot thicker. It's bread. It's like a wonderful yeasty bread kind of thing. In Rome, it's terribly, terribly thin. Almost it doesn't exist. The crust, it's very, very thin. So you make it to taste. But pizza is a way of life over there.
Yeah, I know that it wasn't until I had been in France that we actually had a pizza that was anything close to what you get in America.
To what you get in the States, yeah.
Time, but you actually really adapt. Now, what was the community that you lived in like? to me, I got that sense that welcome to our family, even though you might have been new. What was that like for you folks?
It's very much like that. All the people that we know, most of the people that we know are artists in one way or another. We have painters, photographers, designers for film, sculptors, architects. It's a very artistic community. I think that's one of the bonds that brought this crowd together. The other bond being the good life, eating and drinking and this sort of ongoing party that just keeps bubbling along, and you can either partake or not partake on any given night. But the Italian people, the Italians that we've gotten to know and befriend, were very open. I mean, these people are very open. As Jill was talking before, it's always a family. Whenever you get involved with an Italian, you get involved with the whole family. And our favorite restaurant, this little trattoria, which is like a roadhouse, a very simple place, and I think one of my favorite restaurants in all the world, is a family. Mama's in the kitchen, the girls are running the front of the house, the daughters, the kids are doing their homework at the table next to you, their cats are running around. It's just a family place. And a friend of mine, Bruno, the guy actually that we bought our house from, and Bruno is an Italian from Rome, but is very much a part of this crowd of ours, expat crowd of ours. And he said this restaurant is called the Palazzaccio. And he said when you go to the Palazzaccio, it's the same menu that they had 30 years ago. And if you go to the Palazzaccio 30 years from now, the menu will be exactly the same. Nothing will change. They do what they do, and they do it well. Mm-hmm. And that's just an astonishing thing. And we are now members of the family. One of the sisters and her daughter from the Palazzaccio came over to New York this year, and it was her first time ever out of Italy, and their first time. And they were a little bit freaked out by New York, and so what they wanted to do was stay in the apartment and cook. And she was making ravioli all night, into the night. And so I really learned a lot that week about making fresh pasta, because I was learning from a master, Uh-huh. And then finally, we got her out and we took them to a Chinese restaurant. Well, they had never eaten Chinese food before. They had never eaten anything but Umbrian food, not even Southern Italian food, just Umbrian food. And it was a revelation. But of course, what they had was lo mein, because that's pasta.
Of course. Yakisoba.
Exactly.
Joe.
Jill's off right now.
Oh, okay,
sorry.
That's fine.
I'll answer for her.
That's fine. Okay.
Nope, she says she'll get on. Hang on.
Okay.
She'll be right on.
I guess. Yeah, she's back again.
Sorry.
So, how much did the two of you begin to master any of the ancient family cooking traditions that you experienced over there in Umbria?
Well, Mike is the cook. He's the cook, and he's a really good cook in America, and he's a great cook in Italy because the ingredients are so fantastic. It's a pleasure. I feel very, very lucky to have a guy who loves cooking so much. But I must say that when I'm in Italy, I think about food almost as much as he does.
Mm-hmm.
And I get up in the morning and I go into our vegetable garden, our orto in the summertime, and I see what's fresh, and I can't wait to figure out what we should do with it for lunch, sometimes there's fruit on the trees that I can have for breakfast, and then while we're having lunch, we talk about what we're going to have for dinner. So it's
that's a way to plan the day.
Exactly. And I actually, this last time we were there, I got into baking bread because I really enjoy having grainy bread in the morning, and that's not something that is made much in our area in Umbria. So I started making a recipe from Puglia, from the south, the heel of the boot, and it's a much richer kind of grainy bread, and I just loved it. So that's my new tradition.
It's great. It's wonderful having Jill in the kitchen, because before the kitchen was my place, and she would set the table and do all that stuff. But now she's in the kitchen, which is kind of nice.
Well, it's just fun to be together to be able to create things such as a meal, whether it's breakfast or
There's
lunch.
nothing like it, and then to have friends to share it with. That's about my favorite thing in the world. Now the difference for me in terms of cooking, because cooking's been my hobby for years, and I cooked all different kinds of food: Chinese food, French food, American food, everything. And I was fairly creative about it all. Well, let me try a little of this, and this might be different. And in Italy, it's not like that. They have rules about how to make a dish. And there's a story I tell in the book about Bruno and his wife. He married this wonderful Mexican woman. Her name is Mayas. And when on the first night that they were together, Mayas, who's a good cook, Mexican cook, decided to make his favorite dish, spaghetti carbonara, because Bruno's Roman and carbonara is a Roman dish. And she put it on the table, and he said, "What's this?" Because it had little peas in it. She added some peas, some fresh peas, and she said, "Well, this is carbonara." And he says, "Carbonara is bacon, egg, and cheese. This is not carbonara." And he said, "No, it's." She said, "But you think it's good? You like it?" He said, "Yes, it's delicious, but it's not carbonara. Carbonara you can call this pasta vaffanculo, but don't call it carbonara." Pasta vaffanculo, I won't translate on the radio, but it's not a nice thing. So the next day,
like that scene from the Odd Couple where he's like, "How it's garbage."
So the next day, she put down a dish for him, and she had made some spaghetti and put American ketchup on top of it. And he said, "What's this?" And she said, "That's pasta vaffanculo." And he never criticized her cooking again.
Be careful what you say.
That's right.
Because you're going to get it, I'll tell you.
It's coming right back at you.
Now, I'm kind of curious, Michael, and Joe, either of you can answer this question or even together, is that as a person who listens to this program or picks up your book, Living in a Foreign Language, and they think, this really sounds like maybe a nice change of pace for myself, what are some things they should consider before they take that step?
Well, I think one of the main things that is appealing about doing something like this is taking the leap in terms of immersing yourself in the culture, and really what we're discovering as we've been, in the last 5 years experiencing Italy is that the more language we learn, the more part of the culture we are. And we'll never be Italians, but we're having a much richer experience as we get further and further into the language, and we sort of didn't realize that at first. We felt inadequate in terms of the language, but we didn't realize what a difference it would make. And I think that's one of the things to consider is are you willing to do that? Because I think it's not. We certainly know people that have homes in Italy, second homes in Italy, and are not really trying to learn the language. Don't feel like they have a facility for it or something, and that's their choice. But I think it makes it much more worthwhile. And at our age, it's more daunting to have to learn a new language, but it's also fun. We've gotten so much out of it. It's just it's great to speak like an Italian because you become, more animated, more lively, more life-affirming.
Right.
And I think it's well worth the whatever it entails to at least make an attempt. And the Italians love it so much when you attempt to speak their language. They're so warm and embracing about it. They don't criticize you for your mistakes. And I think that's really makes it worthwhile.
At least not after the first pitcher of wine anyway. They don't criticize you. After a while, it just becomes fun. I know that we've had many times, I guess, on the program who had lived abroad, traveled abroad, and I know in my own experience it was the same for me, that the more you showed or made an effort to really understand a culture, the more the culture pulled you in to teach you. and the greater your experience was. And
Mm-hmm.
I just felt so sad for the people, some of the friends that I knew that just said, no, I'm an American, this is the way it is for me, I don't care to learn anything.
Yeah.
And I told them, I said, you're really missing out. It's just amazing what happens when you make an effort.
Absolutely. And you know, a lot of Americans tend to do that. We were in Rome once, and we were having lunch at some sidewalk cafe, and next to us was a table of American tourists, and the kids said, "Oh, Ma, we had Italian food yesterday. Can we get something else?" Well, you can't. You know, that's all they have over there.
That's funny. I know that here in the book, it was funny that you were talking about, there was a story of a particular place that set up, as you said, tents and for restaurants. It was sort of like a carnival.
Oh, it's Agra.
And your friend Carolyn won a grand prize that I just cracked up laughing because you got a picture of that in the book. Go ahead and talk about that story. That was kind of funny.
They have these sagras all over the place. Every little town has a sagra, and what it is, it's usually over a weekend, and it's like a feast where they cook the local specialty. Like there's the onion sagra in Canara, and the goose sagra in Betona, and the porchetta sagra here, and they take the local specialty and they make a bunch of dishes, and all the townspeople pitch in and serve it, and they raise money for the town. It's the big fundraiser for the year. So as a tourist or as a visitor, or even as a resident, you can run around and go to a different sagra every weekend, and they put out big picnic tables and everybody plays, and then you kind of walk through the town, which is wide open, and all the shops are open. And they have little games and shooting galleries, and they have this gambling game, which they call pesca per beneficio. In other words, fishing for charity. Mm-hmm. And you put your hand in a bowl and you pick out a number, and then they look up the number and see what you've won or didn't win. So our friend Caroline, who was with us at the time, won the big prize, la pesca, the big fish. She won. And what it was, what the big prize was a whole prosciutto, which was about the size of Caroline. I mean, it's a big thing, a big prosciutto.
Right.
And then they marched her through the town to prove to everybody that it's possible to win the big prize.
Because nobody believed it at that time.
That's great. It's been a pleasure to have both of you on our program today. Now,
Likewise.
if a person's getting ready to prepare to possibly do something such as the two of you have done, what are some things they should consider before making this move?
Well, I think one of the main things is there really is a difference in the culture, and there will be things that will be frustrating because things don't happen efficiently a lot of the time, and that's one of the reasons that you sort of have to change your rhythm. Is that the rhythm in Italy is different.
Mm-hmm.
The electrician will say, "I'll be there tomorrow," and he's there a month from now, and you have been counting on having those outside lights for your big party. You're just going to have to get candles. It's just how it is. It's just a different way of thinking. It's not. It's not. Snap your fingers and get it done. And that's a big adjustment. But once you make it, then you get your shoulders relax. Because you'll just have to take it as it comes. Mm-hmm. And it's a very different way of thinking about services that you expect to have done for you, et cetera. And that can be very, very frustrating for people. And I know people have decided, this isn't for me. So that's one thing.
But we also find it's the same, the opposite way. If we're over there for 6 weeks and we really get into the Italian way of living, and we'll come back to New York and try to import into New York the Italian rhythm, you can't do it. When you're here, you have to be here. When you're there, you have to be there. That's my advice.
Really, truly be in the moment, that's for sure.
Yeah, be local.
Get local, wherever you are.
Get local, there you go.
And,
well, again, the book, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and, make sure that you are with somebody that you love to spend time with.
That helps a lot.
Oh, I'm sure it does. Honey, are you as frustrated as I am that we finally don't know how to say prosciutto? Well, it's certainly been a pleasure to have both of you on our program today.
Thank you,
And are you planning anything together as far as maybe getting involved in a movie or another show again, or are you kind of feeling like you're pulling back away from that?
No, we're going to do a play in New York.
A
musical in the fall. It's called Enter Laughing, based on the play and the original book by Carl Reiner, and it's a lot of fun. We're doing it at the York Theater in Manhattan. And,
first preview September 3rd, and it'll be running until mid to late October.
And somebody just may get to win a prosciutto ham.
There is some lucky person. That's right.
Well, Michael Tucker and Jill Eikenberry, thank you for joining us on our program today. It was a real pleasure to understand something that I've even experienced myself, and that is that, you know, there's an ancient Chinese maxim that simply says all people are afforded the same number of years. But the Chinese learned through their meditation to slow that down, and it certainly sounds like Italy would be an ideal place for somebody who would like to experience that.
That's very well said.
Yeah. Well, thank you again for being on our program
today.
Thank you so much.
Thanks,
you bet.
Bye.
Oh, you bet. And again, the book is Living in a Foreign Language, and our guests joining us today, Michael Tucker and his wife, Jill Eikenberry. And again, if that's something you're interested in doing out there, folks, remember, it's going to be a culture change, but the more that you change into the culture, the more richer your experience will be. Thank you for joining us on the Beyond 50 radio program today. I'm Daniel Davis, and be sure to visit our website at beyond50radio.com. That is the number 50 with a 50, and sign up for our free weekly e-newsletter. And also tune into our show coming up this Friday from 12 noon to 1. Thank you again for joining us today, and remember, live your day past halfway.